Yesterday morning, a shooter opened fire on the Annunciation Catholic School's first Mass of the school year. 2 young students, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, were killed, and 17 others were wounded, some in critical condition. 13 of those are young children, 3 of those are elderly parishioners who were just attending Mass alongside them. And then the shooter committed suicide. It is an unspeakable evil on every level. And most importantly right now, before we go any further, we can and should continue in the nation's effort to pray for the victims in the hospital, the fellow students, and the families who lost children. Now, I think immediately in the moments after an evil of this magnitude, we almost instinctively ask, why? Why would God let this happen? Even though he's not the perpetrator, it's just almost like an instinctive why. Why would you allow this? But we live in a fallen world. It's broken. We know that it's not the way that he originally designed it. And so then my question moves to, well, why would someone do this? And though I don't often give attention to perpetrators of heinous acts like a mass shooting, the shooter's why was immediately on display, even if local authorities wouldn't admit it at first. And because of that, I think it's important to understand who pulled the trigger and why. Because this was targeted. It was planned by a 23-year-old man named Robert. However, his name was changed legally as a minor to Robin in 2020 because he began identifying as a girl. And he had a digital footprint, one that people very quickly found online. And even though platforms tried to scrub it immediately, as they always do, this footage was saved and began circulating almost immediately. And even though the mainstream media didn't dive into most of these details, I believe his motive is absolutely important to this story. Now, yesterday, I followed the Reddit trail and quickly came upon his now deleted YouTube channel, where 4 years ago, he sat reading an entire dryer manual for a washer and dryer. And then yesterday, within hours of the shooting, though I can't tell exactly what time these videos were posted, he shared at least 3 deeply disturbing videos. Now, I'm briefly going to reference some of these things within these videos, but I'm not going to show the full videos to you guys. I'm just going to show you some screenshots, so just be cautioned if you don't want to see his writings. One of the first YouTube videos that I saw was a long written apology that he wrote out to his family and friends, in addition to being filled with a bunch of vile nonsense. And I saw that in his other postings. I immediately wondered, had he been posting stuff like this before? Had he been collecting these things, his arsenal, for a while? Another video that he posted that morning was a 20-minute upload of a handwritten journal that appeared to have been dated back starting in July, and then he just flipped through every page. Didn't read it, but just kind of had the journal and the camera's up here, and he's just flipping through every page. It was all written in what appears to be Russian, or what they're calling Cyrillic language. And though it's not easily translated, obviously, if you don't speak that language, his desire to kill children was very evident in his writings. And then at the end of his journal, he showed a drawing of the layout of the school's mass and proceeds to stab the paper in the pews. This is just a screenshot of that. I mean, it was so creepy to just hear his breathing, and he'd occasionally say things like, I can't help myself, I have to kill. It was disgusting. And this is a church and a school that his mom used to work at. And at another point in his journals, he had mentioned how when he was younger, he got in trouble at school for fantasizing about shooting up the school in about 7th grade. And he says he was put in a room and made sure he wasn't a threat, but that he had no memory of talking to a therapist or anything else. And that was years ago at this point, which I just heard before I came in here this morning, but I thought that was another important thing to note. Another drawing of his showed what appeared to be a self-portrait of sorts, which one user on X translated. And the X user wrote, "This is more than mental illness, this is demonic possession." Essentially, what this looks like is an illustration of him, and then he's looking in the mirror at this beast demonic figure. And the text around it says, "Who? When will this end? Help me. I don't want to. Help. Kill yourself, kill." And there's a lot of that kind of writing, again, just sprinkled in his journal. Not that potentially being possessed or listening to voices in your head suddenly becomes an excuse, but it begins to expose that we are dealing with evil much larger than people realize. Now, other screenshots I took from the manifesto are videos like this, showing a target with Jesus' face on it. Another part of his videos were just showing his magazine clips covered in Sharpie, saying mocking things like the following. "Where is your God? I'm the woker baby, why so curious? F everything that you stand for. Kill Donald Trump. Do you believe in God?" And a lot of language like that. Now, obviously, this was quickly being discussed all over X, and one person made a good point and highlighted a part of scripture that I wanted to read here. He said, the picture of Jesus on the shooting target poster, and then they shared Ephesians 6:12. And this, for those of you who are not very familiar with the Bible, this is a part where Apostle Paul is talking to the Ephesians, which was a group of believers, about what they were experiencing, what they were dealing with. And he said, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." And it is a reminder, too, that God will not be mocked. And even though yesterday, for a few moments, evil prevailed, it will not win. We know this. And yet it is terrifying and heartbreaking to witness children in places of worship being attacked. And just a few years ago, a mass shooter targeted children at the Covenant Christian School here in Nashville, touting a similar manifesto as a trans individual targeting Christian children. And back then, immediately leaders of independent and Catholic schools in Minnesota actually sent a letter to their governor asking for help. In a letter dated April 14th, 2023, that specifically addressed school safety in non-public schools, Tim Benz, the president of Mindependent, and Jason Adkins, the executive director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference, stressed an urgent and critical need in Minnesota to make sure our schools are secure and safe, in light of recent and continuing attacks on our schools in this country and in our state. So there is evidence of a demand for safety and security, a higher demand for that, in even the Minnesota schools following what happened here in Nashville. And though there was an actual demand, it's not just thoughts, it's not just feelings, there was actual action trying to be had there, none of the funding for that was ever received or given. Even though, according to Adkins, the money did exist. We talk a lot about demanding action and safety, as we should. Those discussions should absolutely be going on, especially where our most vulnerable congregate every single day and where children go to school. We know, unfortunately, that we live in a dark, broken world. Of course, we need safety and security. And yet, in this instance, nothing was done. Action was demanded, the story fell out of the news, and the lawmakers didn't end up coughing up the money to help. Now, am I saying that Tim Walz is directly to blame for this? No, absolutely not. Nor do I think any politician is ever directly to blame, even though some people love to say that kind of thing after a tragedy. I don't think that's helpful or productive. And yet, I want to talk about this further, because Daily Wire also found out that in the same month that that letter was sent, Walz focused his attention on legislation declaring Minnesota a trans refuge and promising to protect those seeking gender-affirming care. And after hearing that news, I immediately wondered, has the mainstream media dove into that? Are they willing to look at the multiple mass shooters who were trans-identifying, targeting children in the last few years? Because there are several. Perhaps explore correlations between mental disorders or drugs being taken for that same gender-affirming care? No. Instead, their focus has been on telling their viewers multiple times, essentially, that prayer doesn't work. Stop praying, forget praying, it's not helping. Multiple reporters were parroting that in the last 24 hours. So quick to scoff at our prayers, but slow to have the difficult conversations. One guy over on Twitter made a good point about this, and he said, "I don't expect irreligious journos to get it, but still, imagine trying to lean on your faith after someone who hates your beliefs murders your child, only to see mainstream media and elected leaders publicly scoff at your faith too." Because it wasn't just exclusive to reporters, politicians were also saying that. And even though I saw multiple leaders over the last 24 hours saying to forget your prayers, my response to that is no, never. While I get it that to some, hearing just thoughts and prayers echoed after every catastrophic event almost can feel hollow, prayers specifically are far from that. Now more than ever, we have to pray for the 17 victims, for the families who are suffering the unimaginable, for the student body that just experienced this. Contrary to what the news tries to get you to believe, prayer does have power. And for anyone trying to say that it doesn't is lying to you. One of the shooter's despicable goals was to mock God, to kill and destroy innocence and goodness, his creation, and then turn around and ask us, where is your God? He was a godless, perverted, evil man, and he's dead, now forever in a place that is void of God. But our God is alive. And he's here, and he still reigns. And these devastating signs of evil within our country and our world just emphasize that we need him in our hearts and in this country desperately.